staying in the SEC, a name that has been in a few places now, but very, very solid and productive player. Jalen Catalon, safety, is headed back to the SEC. So this is a guy who started his career at Arkansas, went to Texas, UNLV, and is now heading to Missouri to play for Coach Eli Drinkwitz and his staff over there. And it's an interesting story with this one, D. This is a guy, Jalen Catalon. I remember a few years back when I was doing a lot of recruiting as an NFL agent, his name was heavily in the mix as a top 100 type talent and potential pick. Had an injury at Arkansas, ends up transferring to Texas. I think the injuries kind of caught up to him, but had a really, really good bounce back year, showed he was healthy at UNLV, and he lands back in the SEC. And I'm kind of honestly surprised we didn't hear his name more in the portal because of his past experience. But again, I'm rooting for this guy as someone who I know was a big-time, legit NFL prospect. The injuries got in his way, as we've mentioned, but can really finish his college career off solid here back at Missouri.
Yeah, you look at the timeline: Arkansas, Texas, UNLV, and then, of course, now Missouri. 4-star player out of Mansfield, Texas. This is amazing to me. You look at the class of 2019, pre-pandemic, where Catalon was in. Look at some of the safeties in this class: Kyle Hamilton, Daxton Hill, Lewis Seen, Nick Cross, Jordan Battle. These are all guys you see on Sundays. So older player, but sometimes we see these guys that bounce around a little bit. There's character concerns, things like that. This guy's an honor roll kid. And, you know, the fact that he's been around so long at a position like safety, which is so much about IQ, so much about knowing where to line up, knowing how to line people up, just knowing what you're seeing. That experience is invaluable, especially when you combine it with somebody who has NFL talent in his body. He was an NFL prospect back in 2020, right, when he was first team All-SEC as a young player. The shoulder injuries are scary because when you watch this guy play, he is the definition of a downhill thumper. He flies downfield. He makes tackles that are borderline reckless, probably why he had some shoulder injuries in the first place. But the physicality didn't leave him at UNLV. His stats last year were outstanding. You look at some of the numbers here at UNLV. I'm talking about 96 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 5 INTs, 4 pass deflections, first team All-Mountain West. The PFF grades are off the charts, 78.7 in coverage and 73.5 in run defense, even with the bump shoulder. So he is still very much a productive player. And the body has always been SEC caliber. That's where he signed out of high school. That's where he was first team in the conference. So you combine the SEC traits with the IQ of someone who's been around the block. I think this could end up being a home run for Missouri, assuming he can stay healthy. This is a defense that, you know, really needs some leadership and someone to be a tone setter. And I think that's what Catalon is. He is a tone setting defensive player just by the way he plays the game and his experience.
Arkansas fans aren't too happy, man. They two teams they don't like at all, Missouri and Texas. And we're getting a comment here from Matthew Owen saying, I hate that players can transfer as many times as they want. Look, I would think in the next year or so, there's going to be some sort of legislation where there's going to be a limit somewhat. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is a situation where it's very much ad hoc. You have lawyers drafting settlements that should be collectively bargained, right, in a normal situation by employees and employer. That's normally how you kind of set the rules. These are being done in the settlement of an antitrust suit, so that's a little unusual. That's why you see things so ad hoc. I think if you ultimately get it where it's more professionalized, look, this is just what it is in 2024, 2025 now. Then you can kind of set these rules the same way the NFL sets rules, the same way that the NBA and Major League Baseball set rules. Right now, it's being done ad hoc because it's really being done through lawsuits under, antitrust law. And then the rules of the NCAA kind of get stricken here, stricken there, as opposed to, hey, let's come together and make some rules.
Yeah, it's a good point from Kane's Cat C305, who says the reason you fell in love with college football is not the way it currently is. Yeah, I mean, look, you don't know if your favorite players are going to be there for 2-3 years, 4 years. So it's you don't want to become emotionally attached anymore, right?
But look, I mean, it was not fair to the players before.
I'm not
So
saying it was.
yeah.
I'm giving a little credence to his.
And I think there's some things about college football that are better now. There's some things that are not as fun. Certainly, if you're in the coaching community, this is not fun. I think you just have to get together and make some rules together. The problem is, again, it's not an NFL or MLB situation where you say, here's the players union, here's the owners, let's negotiate. It's a little different than that. So that's what's making it hard to get together and say, these are the rules, because anytime they make rules, they're going to get challenged in the court of law. And the courts have been pretty clear. The NCAA is in the wrong. They've lost every time they've gone to court. So, the players, the NCAA does not want to recognize the players as employees, but that's what's preventing this process. Now, one option is they go to Congress and get a safe harbor from antitrust law so they don't get sued every 2 seconds. And we'll see if that happens. That's been a tricky thing to get across in the recent years. Let's see if the political climate is more favorable now for them to do that. But if they do that, that's not necessarily fair to the players, because the players have been the ones winning in court every single time. And then you kind of get around that by giving NCAA a safe harbor to not abide by antitrust law. So where this ends up, in my best guess, is that ultimately the players will be in some sort of union and they can negotiate directly with these schools to create a set of rules that everybody follows and agrees to. And I'm sure number one on that list is going to be stopping these 1-year contracts that you don't even have in the pros, where every year you're renegotiating. That's just not how it is in any sport except for college football, which makes it a little tricky.
Yeah, and look, and you mentioned the coaches, how tough it is for them too. The thing is, in the pros, the coaches aren't tasked with recruiting. They're not tasked with scouting, which is essentially half of the recruiting job, right? So they're not asked with bringing the players to the table and doing a lot of the stuff that management otherwise would have to deal with. So it's crazy.
But look, for a guy like Catalon, a great opportunity. You were in the SEC. Injuries kind of push you out of the SEC. You go to UNLV, you rehabilitate your stock, and now you're back where you started with a chance to be just where you were in 2020, first team All SEC on the way to the pros. So you hope for Catalon's sake that even though there's so many dashes there in his school history, that it ends pretty close to where it started and gets him off to the NFL.
Yeah, and last thing on this is, like, everyone has different reasons for transferring a bunch of times. Obviously, he had the injury stuff at Arkansas. We don't know how it ended there. He ends up going to Texas. The injury stuff obviously still lingered. He had to keep playing and at a high level. He had to go prove himself again at UNLV, and now he has an opportunity. So, and again, by all accounts, has done everything the right way in terms of, character and how he's handled himself and all that. So, should be interesting to watch him this year back in the SEC.